Welcome, my friends of the interwebs, and welcome to a very special edition of Real Life. This will be the oil and gas edition, the secret edition of Real Life. If all goes well, you should be watching this on Propaganda Buster's channel. But however, I am MadBadVooDo, and hopefully you have all caught up with what was going on with the oil and gas drilling on my property. If you have not, this video will make a lot more sense if you go over to the MadBadVooDo channel. On the left hand side, look down and you'll find a link to my gas and oil channel. Check that channel out and watch Target Oil and Gas Mike Smith part 1, 2, 3, and 4. Otherwise this may not make all that much sense to you. And hopefully you're not distracted by my breath. It's a bit chilly in the north. This global warming thing is just not working out for me. Anyway, let me get started here because I don't want this to be a forever long video. I do want to say congratulations to Tony though, who won my camera, the camera I'm using. Anyway, alright, where I left off with Mike Smith, or Target Oil and Gas Mike Smith, was they had just drilled a well on my property in Kentucky. Most of you probably already know that I have several hundred acres located in southeast Kentucky. The property, for me at least, was purchased with the intentions of developing the land for its natural resources. So for me that meant cutting the timber, marketing the coal on the property, and also the oil and gas. On my property I had a little bit over towards the power lines that I could put gas wells in before the coal came out. And because you always want to get your coal out before you put any gas lines and gas wells and things like that. And that's exactly what we did. We marketed the coal, but then we did recognize that we had a small spot that wouldn't be affected, or the coal wouldn't be affected if we put oil and gas wells. So we went ahead and contracted or leased our oil and gas rights to a company called Target Oil and Gas. Unbeknownst to me at the time, it turns out that they were criminals. What they would do, their game really was not to be successful oil and gas men. Their game literally was to fleece investors of their money. So just to make it simple, for simple math, if they could raise $1 million to do a drilling project or a well project, and then say spend $200,000 of it actually drilling what they would really hope for was a dry hole, then they could pocket $800,000 and move on to the next drilling project. See, producing oil and gas really was more of an inconvenience to these people. it kind of got in their way of fleecing investors. They really weren't all that interested in actually doing any real work, and they were very successful I mean, they literally duped investors out of millions and millions of dollars. So, how do you argue with success? Yeah, anyway, they're all facing 20 years in prison, but I'll get to that. So, anyway, they drilled Bell County number 1, which was the first of 3 wells that would be drilled on my property, and it came in huge. It really was a great well. It brought a huge smile to my face. It came in at over 4.2 million cubic feet of natural gas a day, and to put that in perspective of what we're talking about as far as potential revenue, at that particular time, I think natural gas, don't quote me on this, but I think natural gas was right around $14 or $15 a thousand cubic feet, okay, or 1,000 cubic foot. So, we're talking about a shit ton of money. A well that was capable of bringing in some serious cash. So they start to produce this well. It was a complete clusterfuck from day one. But once Target took over, Phoenix Drilling Company had left. It started, there was red flag after red flag after red flag, okay? One of which they weren't really prepared to do anything with a producing well. My property was very uniquely situated in the sense that the transportation lines actually, technically, well, literally ran through a portion of my property. So a company called Delta Natural Gas, if you think of them as a trucking company, they get paid to transport the natural gas to, you know, the first purchasers upstream or downstream, however you want to look at it. So it wasn't a huge deal to run a pipeline and connect to Delta. It was money and it was logistics, but for the most part it was a pretty simple deal. A lot of people who have gas wells or get duped by these oil and gas companies are nowhere near transportation lines. They don't realize at the time that the oil and gas company that they're dealing with are promoters. Not all oil and gas companies, but a lot of them. And it's not really about producing anything. It's just about selling investors on the idea of having an oil or gas well. So, but I was lucky in the sense that the transportation lines were literally a stone's throw away from where the actual well was. And but there was a railroad between the well and the transportation lines. And your railroads don't let you just drill underneath their tracks. Well, let's put it this way: it's expensive and it's time consuming. The railroad's a very powerful entity in this country. It has been since, you know, the earliest days of the railroad. And there's literally hoops you have to jump through in order to get a permit to drill underneath a railroad. So they were dragging their ass on this, and I was just, you know, I've got this well that is a cash cow, and for whatever reason, at least in my mind at the time, Target didn't seem to be all that concerned about getting into the barn and starting to milk it. You know, and the only thing keeping us from milking a cow was drilling under the railroad and connecting to Target oiling, or excuse me, to Delta Natural Gas's pipeline. So, you know, and by the way, the whole time this is going on, I'm also dealing with the stupidity of Frito and the drug deal, you know, well, Frito, the drug dealer, his whole thing, family, the fence, the whole 9 yards, all the stuff that you'll find in my real life series of videos. So I've got these multiple things going on that are just driving me crazy. But after a long time and a lot of prodding, and you know, here's the thing about Target. Mike Smith, the president of Target Oil and Gas, his brother, Christopher Cleo Smith, also known as Chris Smith, the vice president of the company, you couldn't believe anything they said. You know, and I learned early on when trying to figure out what was going on, verify. So Mike Smith would tell me, well, we're waiting for the, you know, we're waiting for the railroad, you know. Well then, you know, I would call the railroad and they're like, we don't even know who Mike Smith at Target Oil and Gas is. And I'm like, well, they never put in for a permit now, we haven't heard of them. Son of a bitch, you know. Just crazy, stupid shit. I had a connection with a surveyor, you know, Mike Gambro, who is an awesome guy, awesome surveyor, just straight up human being. I expected Mike Smith to use him because he was the one that actually surveyed out the well sites. But for some strange reason, Mike Smith wasn't using him, and maybe it was because by then Mike Smith realized that you know, me and Mike Gambro were friends, had developed a friendship. It was just a whole clusterfuck. I mean, it really was. Eventually, after me browbeating Mike Smith, they actually got the permit to go underneath the railroad, and which they did. They actually contracted with a company to actually lay pipe, drill underneath the railroad, and then connect us to Delta Natural Gas. And that was the other thing. Delta, it takes, you know, you have to pay Delta to connect to their lines. It's like $10,000. And Delta was waiting forever for them to cough the $10,000 up. You know? And so Mike Smith would tell me, well, we're waiting for Delta to come out and hook up the line. I'm like, no. I just talked to Delta. Delta says they're waiting for you to actually pay them to go do that. You know? So, red flag after red flag after red flag, because I realized that Mike Smith was lying to me. I have this huge well, you know, literally worth millions of dollars, sitting there on my property, you know, and I'm just flabbergasted by the whole thing. And so, finally though, I'm going to give you the abridged version. Finally though, they do manage to get connected to Delta. Now remember, this well came in at 4.2 million cubic feet a day. But all of a sudden, they're only producing the well at 500,000 cubic feet a day. Well, 500,000 is a long way from 4.2 million. You know, we're talking well over 3 million cubic feet a day that's not being produced. That's, you know, that's crazy. You got a cash cow and you're not milking it for all it's worth. So I said to and remember, I didn't really even realize this was going on until I got my first check. And my first check had the production numbers. And it said, you know, how much it was being produced at. And I'm like, what the hell? Because I was there when the well came in. I knew what that well was. I knew exactly what that well was. So I called Mike Smith up, and I said, by the way, this was still when he would still answer his phone when I called him. Soon after this, he no longer answered his phone. So I called Mike Smith up, and I said, Mike, what's going on? I said, you know, and now, by the way, at 500,000 cubic feet a day, my take was just a hair under $3,000 for the month. And, you know, because I don't own all the land, I own a fractional percentage of it. But I think it was like, let's just say $2,900 for the month. I'm just guessing because it's been years ago now, but somewhere around in there. And I called Mike up, and I'm like, dude, you know, what the hell? And he said to me, he said, well, now listen. He said, the infrastructure's new, the pipeline's new. That's a big well. I can't just crank that baby open and let her flow. He goes, you know, I want to ease and make sure everything's right. Which made sense to me. I was actually, well, that's logical. That makes sense to me. Because at this point, I'm starting to look for red flags. I'm like, well, that's not one of them. And he said to me, he said, I'll crank her up next month. And I'm like, well, okay, let's just say $3,000 so far, not bad. I'm okay. You know, and remember, he's ready. By the way, he's got 2 other well sites prepped and are just waiting for the permits. You know, so I'm like, all right, well, $3,000 a month. You know, I can do it. Next month, it'll go up to where it should be, which will be a hell of a lot of money. So the next month came, and I got my check, and it was for roughly the same amount of money. And I called him, and I'm like, Mike, I said, you told me you were going to crank this bad boy up. You know, what's going on? And he said to me, he's good. Mike Smith is a serious con man. I mean, he's smooth. He said to me, he said, listen, I was thinking about it. He was pondering it. And he said, if I produce this well at 500,000 feet a day, he said, it will produce forever. So here's where the greedy person in me comes out, because I'm thinking to myself, when he said forever, it was like, ooh, forever, you know? Because typically you produce a well and eventually they start falling down and eventually they end. They have a lifetime, a lifespan. And I'm like, well, $3,000, at that time I was still a fairly young man, you know? I'm like, shit, $3,000 a month forever, and I got 2 more wells coming? Even if those 2 wells only do half as good, that's $6,000 a month forever. Life is good. I still got coal coming, and then, by the way, once the coal's gone, then there's room for probably another 10 oil and gas wells. So I'm thinking, shit, doesn't get any better than this. So, so the next month came, and my check was about half as much. Maybe even less than that, maybe a third as much. And I mean, I opened up the envelope, and I'm like, I thought there was an accounting error. I'm like, oh, hell no, they're not screwing me like this. So I call Mike Smith, and he picks up the phone, and I said, what's going on? You know, I don't know. My check was probably $800 or so. I think it was right around $800. And he goes, I don't know. Oh my God, I can't believe it. We must have just hit a gas pocket. It's falling like a stone. We don't know what's going on with it. And I'm like, holy shit. How the hell did this happen? Oh, Mike Smith don't know. And that's kind of when, at that point, is actually, they weren't indicted yet by the federal government. At that point, though, I thought to myself, hold the hell on. You know, at that point, I got a good whiff of what definitely smelled like a rat. So I made the 4 Mike Smith Target Oil and Gas videos, or Target Oil and Gas Mike Smith Part 1, 2, 3, and 4. I was kind of, you know, I just wanted to point out some stuff, and I was going to continue with that story, actually. That was kind of like therapy, letting it get out of my chest. Plus, kind of as a warning to potential investors in this company that you know, you could invest in them. At that point, you know, I couldn't prove that they were con men. You could invest in them, but let me show you how they've operated so you can make an informed decision. And to this day, if you go on Google and you type in, you do a Google search for Target Oil and Gas Mike Smith, you're going to see my videos right up at the top. So I kind of felt like I was doing my part in hopefully protecting people. So I get a message, a PM on that show, and basically saying, if you're for real, give me a call. and I think it was give me a call or send me your number. I think it was send me your number and I'll call you. I've got some information you're going to want to hear. Well, I was for real, and I had no issues with giving this person my phone number. I didn't know what it was about, but I wanted to hear whatever they had to say. So I sent this person my phone number, and she hasn't given me permission to use her name or anything, so I won't. Okay, but it turns out that this person who contacted me was the ex-wife of one of the major players in the company. And she said, you know, this is who I am. You know, and I freely admit that I'm an ex-wife, and I also freely admit that I may have an axe to grind. And of course, I said to her, I said, well, we've all got an axe to grind for one way, you know, one reason or another. And she said, your suspicions are correct, and this is what they're doing. Da 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 da. And she explained to me the whole process of raising money, selling shares in a well to raise money. And then, of course, you know, trying your best not to be successful, keeping the excess money, and then moving on to the next program, the next pie they would sell. You know, if you think of a well to investors as a pie, and there's, I don't know, 32 fractional shares of that pie, and that's called the working interest. You've got the working interest, and then you've got the royalty interest. Royalty interest being owned by the landowners, or the owners of the minerals. Working interest being owned by the company that drills, or the company that produces the well, which would, in my case was Target Oil and Gas, also known as Kentucky and Indiana Oil and Gas. That's a wholly different story. I won't even go into that right now. However, she did enlighten me as to the fact that there was a Kentucky Indiana Oil and Gas and a Target Indiana Oil and Gas, and they both had the same president, which was Mike Smith. You know, so there was a lot of shenanigans going on there, and a lot of which the government didn't even pursue. Of course, I don't think they needed. They didn't really need to, because they had what they needed, which was to put them away. So anyway, she fills me in on this, tells me that she had talked to a person in the, I want to say the post office, Inspector General's office, and actually gave me that person's phone number. So that next day, I start calling, because this was in the evening, I start calling, you know, the postal inspector, and then from there it kind of snowballed. Next thing you know, I'm talking to a prosecutor, and they're about to indict Mike Smith and Target Oil and Gas. So the indictments, are about to drop, and hopefully I can, if I can get them to Tony, or if Tony, if you go to my oil and gas channel, I think I've actually got links to the indictments and all that stuff, if you want to add them to this video. So anyway, all of a sudden I become, for all intents and purposes, a star witness in a giant oil and gas scheme, where literally millions and millions and millions of dollars had been defrauded from people. It was an amazing time, and at that point I was told I could no longer blog, or I shouldn't say I was told I could not, but it was it was expressed to me that they would rather me not be blogging about any of this stuff, and so at that time I really just couldn't talk about it anymore. So that's why there was only 4 videos for Target Oil and Gas and Mike Smith, instead of continuing on with that saga. And of course, in my real life stories, I have plenty to talk about with Frito and Pinhead and all that stuff. Although the bigger story truly was the oil and gas deal. Pinhead and Frito were you know, they were drug dealers, but they were small-time idiots, is what they were in the grand scheme of things. You know, whereas Mike Smith and Target Oil and Gas, Chris Smith, that whole group there, they're geologists. These people were, they were real con men. They were the Hillbilly Mafia. In fact, they called themselves that, the Hillbilly Mafia. And they literally had millions of dollars coming in, and hobnobbed with important people, judges and whatnot, and lived in multi-million-dollar houses, owned property all over the world. Yeah, these people made Pinhead and Frito look like the, you know, inbred cousin fuckers that they are, or in Frito's case was. So anyway, there's so much more to tell. It's just, I think I'm running out of time here. I have no idea what time it is. But this was a special edition. I may do more on oil and gas with my real life series in the future. There's still some things that are kind of, you know, I'm not positive about yet as far as what I can tell. I did sign a contract with a production company and we're developing a reality television show, and technically I'm really not supposed to talk about oil and gas because the premise of the show will have a lot to do with oil and gas. And so I guess I probably shouldn't even make this, but I'm doing it anyway. Anyway, everybody, Tony, you may have to make this into a couple different segments. I don't know. Anyway, you guys all take care, and thank you very much for tuning in. Tony, once again, congratulations. I can't believe this is the last time I'm going to do this, but see ya.